Hello, all, and thank you for joining in on this conversation today. I'm Isha Bhattacharya, a program manager at Khoj, which is a not for profit contemporary arts organization in New Delhi. Today, I am joined by Khoj's founding member and director Pooja Sood and artist and theatre director Zuleikha Chaudhari. Earlier this year, Khoj, in collaboration with Zuleikha, produced In the Matter Regarding Rights of Nature, which was a fictional hearing under the framework of the National Green Tribunal, which is a government body here in India. The case looked at the troubled relationship between air pollution of the National Capital Region and the stubble burning phenomena, which occurs annually in the neighboring states of New Delhi, of Punjab and Haryana. Delhi, where we're all based, is considered a city which is the most polluted capital in the world. It witnesses around 50,000 premature deaths every year due to air pollution. And what happens here is nothing short of a climate crime. So I'd like to begin this conversation by asking you, Pooja, what has Khoj's role been in addressing ecological issues, especially through the artistic practices that it has supported through the years?
Thank you very much, Isha. Khoj has been working with ecology and ecological practices since 2005, 6, which has been a long time ago. And I'd like to really quote Lucy Lippard, who in this fantastic quote said, has said, and I quote, from the 1960s through most of the 1990s, the left considered environmentalism to be soft politics. And then she goes on to say other things, but mostly she said that for the most part, those who supposedly cared more for the earth and its creatures and creations than for people's revolutions were perceived as acting from a kind of political suburbia. And it was that kind of political suburbia, end quote. It was that kind of political suburbia we were in way back in 2005, 6, where there was a great emphasis on political work, identitarian politics, which was very important in a lot of artistic practice, and a lot of activist work. But somehow, environment was not seen to be center stage. As Lucy goes on to say, today, spared by indisputable proof of human agency in climate change, the environment is in the center foreground. And that we can see that, a lot of organizations across the world need to talk about it. We started in 2007 at a time when there were two artists who were, one of them who was running actually an environmental organization that was Agarwal, called Toxic Link. And he was, at that point, which he is not so anymore, he was a documentary photographer. And there was Atul Bhalla, whose passion and really was trying to explore water. And that was the first residency that we supported and realized the kind of violence that was occurring. We went on then, to support smaller projects. And in 2008, actually, there was an opportunity supported the Institute to do a large, huge contemporary art, public art project, which I was the artistic director of, and it was called 48 Degrees Public Art Ecology. And all the artists worked on various issues of the ecological aspect of Delhi. And some of them really bringing out the kind of teetering ecology that both the city was on, really teetering towards falling off a precipice almost. That was a 10-day festival project, but we continued at Khoj after that, realizing the enormity of what we had seen. We did a series of projects called In Context, Public Art Ecology, as it was a continuation. And over the years from 2010, 11, we did a series of residencies inviting Indian and international artists to participate. And for example, in 2010, we had Andrea Poli, who's very well known and looked at air pollution, do a crazy project in one of the malls that is right opposite Khoj, where she covered a small Maruti Suzuki car in polythene and put on the ignition. And you actually saw the fumes come out. And it was really a a talking artifact to people passing by as to what all the fumes in the city, together with all the multiple cars that we have, what they were doing to our lungs. There was somebody like Brandon Ballantyne, an artist from the US, who looked at setting up these beautiful um, love motels for insects. And really, it was about talking about, it was a multi species inquiry, just as Ackroyd and Harvey, which covered the whole premise, Khoj premises, and grew barley. I mean, they were commenting on the growth and the decay, in our ecosystems. Another residency that we realized, when we realized we couldn't do everything in Delhi. So we went on then to support almost 15 artists for 3 years to work in very hyper-local areas across different parts of India. An artist who worked in the Himalayas at a site called Badrinath, which is a religious site. And he really worked on all the plastic bottles that we used and carried up by the pilgrims who went up and down, when actually being in the Himalayas and having the best natural springs, the water was far purer than all the plastic that the tourists took, and actually created huge amount of waste in the rivers there. There was another artist who worked in Sikkim, which is in the northeast of India. And there was a time when it was really called a place where of gumboots and helmets, because there were 36 dams being built across a river to change the course of the river. And what that was doing to the local ecologies, the microecologies, the microeconomies, and to the people who were being displaced. There were several other such projects, one in Bangalore, on the outskirts of Bangalore, where there was a man-made lake. And, of course, the government decided that they wanted to have a fantastic walking promenade on it. And so the Bangalore Development Authorities, and the way they decided to do that, emptied out the whole lake in order to redo it. As a result of emptying out all the fish and killing the microeconomies of the fishing communities that dotted the lake. I mean, so there were these kind of atrocities and slow and large violences that came to the fore. And I think what Khoj actually did was build a critical mass of artists who now began to look at what was happening in environment and ecological issues across India. And India is a large state. So to actually know what was happening in smaller cities on the outskirts and peri-urban areas was of great importance to us. As a continuation of ecology, and as part of that, we also ran for 3 years an inquiry on food. And those were our food residencies where we invited, again, international and Indian artists. And those, the kind of questions that came up ranged from the poetics of food, the psychological aspects of food, but equally to the politics of food and food sovereignty, something that many of us are grappling with. And these were residencies that were there from 2012 to 14. So as you can see, that the Khoj's engagement with ecology, with environment, has grown exponentially, starting and has been consistent since 2007.
Thank you, Pooja, for that context. I'd also like to ask you about the most recent project that Khoj did around ecology, the Blue Sky Live project, which the staged hearing was also a part of.
And so we started a project which was over 3 years called Does the Blue Sky Lie? Testimonies of Air's Toxicities, which began with the question of how do we think about air, really, especially when it is ephemeral, invisible, removed from our consciousness, and especially by the deceptiveness of the blue sky. I mean, when you have a blue sky, are we really in a cleaner environment? Obviously not. And then, how can art then mobilize attention to the micro encounters that we have with the atmosphere? So, what is that embodied knowledge? It was divided into 4 episodes. The first being, we gave out grants. It was during COVID, so a lot of artists worked from home and built their projects, and we had several meetings online. And there was one manifestation which was an air expo, which was done again in the mall across, because it's one of the most frequented malls, has lots of footfalls, and is right across Khoj. And we set it up as an expo with several booths which had artworks in it. We even commissioned a game, which kind of really put out the complexity of the government as well as the normal citizen, and the environmental concerns that happen when governments have to take have to make some sense of what to do about it, especially when the air pollution goes very high. And mostly that is seen in the months of November, December, October, November, December, when there is a lot of stubble burning that happens in parts of Punjab. And the blame for bad air quality is squarely laid at at the feet of the farmers of Punjab and Haryana. And we felt we really had to think about this and, at first deal with what air means. So we did the Air Expo, we did an exhibition because we are an arts organization and we brought in international artists. We did a series of conversations which we entitled the Cafe Classroom, bringing in activists, environmentalists to really unpack, where we've reached in environmental discourse today. I mean, many of us don't even know. There are so many interlinking aspects that many of us are pretty lost. I mean, it's not just air, how it relates to water, how it relates to soil, what is going on with the policy changes, what is happening with activists that are working on the ground. I mean, there's all these questions that, even as artists, we have to understand if we are to even talk about. These are things that we needed to do, and we were very clear from day one that we wanted a lot of this to be in the public realm. And the final episode, which we were very clear we wanted to be in the public realm, is was a staged hearing, a fictional hearing under the framework of the National Green Tribunal, which is a government agency based in India, using as a point of departure the the air pollution that is caused by stubble burning, but actually going backwards to understanding its historical implications and why it happens. And as we did research, and we did a lot of research, both with the farming communities and secondary research, that it all goes back to the 50s when the Green Revolution came into India, and that not only got a new crop to be grown in Punjab, which was paddy, which was not a local crop, which was rice, and takes a lot of water. But equally, that the cycles, the sowing and the harvesting cycles became closer and closer together, which necessitated that the farmers had to slash and burn, and that became what they did. And now, with the cycles becoming closer and closer, and with some of the wind, it has become Delhi has become even more polluted. But that is not just because the farmers burn. There are many more reasons for it. And we wanted to use that understanding and build an argument for that, but also try and then build it to the larger question of rights of nature. That actually we really need to question whether we can talk about if nature has rights, as many countries across the world have done. This project included three retired judges, practicing lawyers, as well as three artists and three expert witnesses, some of whom were, retired from the Pollution Board of Punjab. There was somebody who understood policy making. It was between reality and fiction, but I think for Khoj, what was the real question and has constantly been is that when you work in public spaces and we work in the public realm, what can really art do? Can it actually push some form of affect, of change? And I think that is what we were trying to achieve.
Thank you for that, Pooja. And this format of the staged hearing is really intriguing and is something that Coach has also done previously with Zuleikha in an earlier iteration, which was called Landscape as Evidence, Artist as Witness. So, could you tell us how Coach's interest and inquiry in law began?
It was when Harvey and Aykroyd, way back in 2011, were on residence with us. And I think they introduced us for the first time to the term ecocide. And then went on to tell us about this famous case by Polly Higgins and her work on ecocide. She's a British barrister, and she led a campaign on ecocide, to be recognized as a crime against humanity. And her work has inspired many people, including artists and environmentalists. And somehow that idea has always stayed with me. I mean, from 2012, 13, 14 onwards. Zuleikha came and did a residency. I think she was part of gaming residency with us. And at that time, very interestingly, she was looking at the format of the game, but within that, she was looking at the performativity of law. And she set up a trial to unpack the Bhaval case. This is a historic case which was extended in the Indian court, a real life case, but historic, about a possible imposter who claimed to be the Prince of Bhaval. He had been between and came back. And the only evidence that existed was a photograph. So, could that photograph be evidence as produced in court, and would it be accepted? And so on and so forth. Those were her questions. So when we were talking about her project during the gaming residency, I mentioned the Polly Higgins case to her, and I asked if she would be interested to work on ecological issues with us and somehow come up with some format where her interest in the performativity of law, and artworks as evidence could kind of co-join with ours on ecology. And that's when the first iteration, which was Landscape as Evidence, Artist as Witness, was born. And this was done in 2017. And it was held at the Constitution Club. And it was about the devastation caused to the environment due to the Ken Betwa case, which is a huge project across India where many rivers are being linked and which has been passed by the government. So we took it on again, created a real life petition, and with a retired judge and two contesting lawyers and three artists, we presented this to the judge. And the judgment is always unknown, and the judge says, we got a judgment. And then a second iteration of this project was done in Goa, where, as many of you will know, Goa is a heavily tourist place. What does tourism do to a site, ecologically, and what does that mean? And it was really about all the luxury apartments that were being set up, because a lot of people from across India moving to Goa, because it's just such a lovely place to be. So that was another smaller version. One aspect that has remained common throughout all the inquiries was the role of communities and local knowledge systems, right? Stage hearing, as I mentioned earlier, we went and visited and did field research with farmers' unions, etc., and with lawyers. And when the real petition was written up, largely by Zuleikha and a lawyer, Harish Mehla, which then subsequently was also vetted by um, the Normandy Chair for Peace. It was a really substantial document, and they spent over a year, refining it and putting the right clauses into it, and a lot of research of past judgments, as a good petition should be. And this petition was put together was submitted by Zuleikha Chaudhari, Khoj International Artists Association, which is ourselves, and a young minor called Maya Anandam. And that was presented to the government, seeking strict action on farmers for stubble burning. And thereon, it kind of unfolded where the government gave their point of view, and then a fictitious farmers union, which consisted of three artists, also had a lawyer representing them, and they shared their work and spoke in very impassioned ways about the right to nature, which really folded back into the need for rights of nature. We decided to do this in Chandigarh, which is the capital of both Punjab and Haryana. We decided to make it trilingual. It was Hindi, Punjabi, and English, because it needed to be situated where it hurt the most, where it mattered the most. And I have to say that when it was put out, we had almost 350 people, many people from Farmers Union, local people who felt that this was their issue and they needed to understand it. So for us, it was important for it to be situated at the right site, and done in languages that were accessible to many more than just the English speaking elite. We did it at the Open Hand, which is a very beautiful public space. The performance, it's in the Trench of Consideration, which was designed by Le Corbusier. And it's like a Greek open amphitheater for people to gather, discuss, and debate. The site became really an integral part of the performance and the scenography. So as you can see, Isha, our engagement with ecology you know, has been a long one, and one that has been hyperlocal, but at the same time extremely global in the issues that we've been trying to discuss.
Thank you for that, Pooja. And I think Zuleikha's practice that you've mentioned is really, really intriguing. And I'd like to ask Zuleikha how her inquiry also into law and its performativity begin, and what all constitutes it.
I'm a theatre director. By theater, I mean, of course, the forms and history of the practice, but I also reference theater in an expanded field, which I take to be a series of strategies. I'm interested in the connections between history, law, and theater as different narrative strategies, all of which retain the tension between speculation and imagination, between truth finding and reality making. And my investigations are particularly around the question of what is reality and how is it represented. My interest in the law specifically comes with two things. One is the word making, word building capacity of law, the legal system as a system which bridges concepts of reality to an imagined alternative. Um, and it is through narratives that we build and understand the relationship between our social constructs and our visions of potential futures. And these narratives, therefore, require a leap of imagination to connect not only what is and what should be, but also what might be. Uh, the second thing is the form of the legal trial, which has many elements of live performance. There is the organization of a space or the scenography, the bodies in that space, the movement of bodies in that space, the particularity of kinds of speech, the authorization of speech itself, codes of conduct, along with, of course, the very obvious costumings and the existence of an audience, which might be the media, which might be concerned parties, etc. I think these two things come together in the question of not only must justice be done, but it must also be shown to be done.
Expanding a little bit more on that, Zuleikha, I think I'd like to ask you about this particular format of the staged hearing, and also what happens when non actors are brought into a performance and what happens when they play themselves, and also about how you imagine artists as witness and what exactly does that signify.
So I'm thinking about power, violence, justice, and the legal system. The legal system in India is the history of it is a colonial one, and every legal system also reflects the power dynamics and values of its particular political milieu. I'm thinking about whether the role of performance in trials helps us to understand the various ways in which violence is addressed, negotiated, transformed, reenacted, and perhaps perpetuated through legal proceedings. This project is the third and last of a series. The other two iterations were called Landscape as Evidence, Artist as Witness. These are staged hearings grounded in current environmental law in India, which exist within major central legislations. And the hearings follow court procedures quite precisely. These hearings have real lawyers. real retired judges and different kinds of experts, and the judgments are not pre-known. I would say what one sees performed is a system, the system of law. What is also performed is various, often conflicting points of view. The trial for me is also a debate. So the trial projects are designed to focus on the performativity or the doing of law, and incorporates non-actors into theatrical production in order to ask questions of both legal performance and theatrical and theoretical production. All three iterations have artists as witnesses. And the question here is, it's an insertion into a very precise system. The question here is, I think, about language and what is it that a legal system can hear, will hear, and how it hears it. Can artists and artworks articulate the web of ecological, cultural, economic, historical, and political relations as legitimate legal narratives in a judicial context? Can artistic process be considered forensic? I'm specifically interested in the kind of knowledge the artist or the actor produces. Is the artist or actor able to dislodge certainties by insisting on the ethical and the epistemic vitality of the desired and the imagined? And in doing so, produce questions about what people take for granted as the real. Can the artist or actor provoke new frameworks for constructing meaning? Of course, these questions, by way of artists' examinations, are always within these staged hearings, but it is also a question that is self-reflexive to the project itself. I would say I'm quite deeply concerned with the question of if and how artistic practice, and for me this would be theater, how it, if at all, engages with real life.
Thank you for that, Zuleikha. I also want to know a little bit more about the aspect of this performance being imagined as a rehearsal towards the petition being filed in the National Green Tribunal, and how that took shape.
Principally, the very untidy process of thought and consideration, which comes with its notions, related notions of contingency, interruption, uncertainty, version, repetition, and failure, are normally what constitutes a rehearsal, which then proceeds to become the so-called real thing of performance. I consider rehearsal as a way of thinking, and also as a strategy. And for me, that means that the rehearsal then foregrounds what all that which takes place on the periphery, and which then ultimately may be obscured by the presentation of a polished and final piece. This iteration of the project has actually two parts. The staged hearing is what I consider to be the rehearsal, because it is based on this event that we will now move towards the second part of the project, which is to tighten and polish the founding petition of the project to submit to the actual National Green Tribunal. Which is why, unlike the earlier two iterations in the series that were commissions of inquiry, this staged hearing follows the laws and the procedure and the protocols of the National Green Tribunal. I think this submission as an actual court document um, is very important, because if court records can be considered a public archive, this is very important, because then the scrutiny of all the documentation is a matter of justice and politics. And for me, of course, I am also asking the question, can theatre be considered a counter archival practice, which allows us to read legal texts against the grain, revealing the silences and omissions in this archive?
Pooja, having been part of this journey with both you and Zuleikha has been a really interesting journey, and we've all collectively learned a lot. And I just wanted to know what you think the way forward is, and how do you think Khoj is going to sustain these lines of inquiry?
Well, that's a good question, Isha, because I don't think this is a line of inquiry that say project done, closed, over. This is something that we're struggling with, talking to artists, inviting artists and scientists and environmentalists to work with us. What we do struggle with is what the far-reaching consequences of art practice can be in this area. And can it make a difference? With this particular project, which is the staged hearing, we're hoping that we can tighten the petition and actually present it to the real National Green Tribunal, and not just as merely a gesture, as a completion of a project, but really to see if they would take cognizance of it. I think that's something we hope can happen. As we speak, both Zuleika and Harish are working on that and trying to fix that a bit to see where we can take it, and then we will together decide where to put it in. So we really don't know what we're going to do with it. It's been very, very unfortunate that vis-a-vis this, there's been a very recent Supreme Court ruling, which is about Zuleikha 2. It is a bull taming sport which is played in the southern state of Tamil Nadu. So while the Supreme Court has considered the cultural defense of the people of Tamil Nadu, it has denied the rights of the bull, of the animal. So if we are really trying to push the rights of nature, of which, of course, the animal kingdom is very much a part, I think we've kind of gone back 3 to 4 steps backwards. So that's not good news for us, but yeah, we're still going to do it. And I think we are at Khoj, this line of inquiry is not just necessary, but I mean, we just have to do it. Look at the crisis. And I think we have to maybe also move towards a call to action. Yeah. I think Khoj has always been committed, and even more so in the asking the question of what can art be and what can it do, but what should it do? What is the possibility, almost in an activist mode, that artists might need to take on themselves, and how we should move over. So as an arts organization, that is something we're very committed to, and I hope we can do that.
Thank you. And of course, thank you both, Pooja and Zuleikha, for joining in on this conversation today. And to our listeners also, we hope that you found this conversation really interesting. And this is all that we have for today, but we hope you tune in for more. Thank you, and bye bye.